everyone, welcome back to Mission Japan. This is where we talk about various embassies and their missions in Japan, where they started, where they're housed right now, where they're located, where that land came from, and what is the prognosis of their relationship with Japan going forward. Today I have the honor of welcoming the ambassador from Israel, Yaffa Ben-Ari. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
You've traveled so far to join us, what, 600 yards?
Approximately, yes.
Yes, your embassy is located in the Bancho area, Nibancho?
Yeah.
How long has the embassy been there?
Well, about 50 years.
50 years. So the relationship between Japan and Israel started in, what, 1952?
Exactly.
But they didn't actually have an embassy here until, what, 10, 15 years after that?
Exactly 10 years.
Okay.
63, the presence of the mission in both countries was upgraded to a level of an embassy. That was back in 63.
Okay, so Israel as a state was established very recently to that point, and then in 1952, they decided to establish some sort of a diplomatic legation, and from there, from 1952 to 1962 or 63, they actually signed diplomatic papers, they exchanged them, and is that when the Japanese also opened an embassy in Tel Aviv?
Not exactly. Basically, official diplomatic relations started on the 15th of May, 1952.
Okay.
That was when the foreign minister of Japan acknowledged the request of Israel to open diplomatic relations. So from that moment on, this is the 15th of May, 1952. And that was merely 2 weeks after Japan became totally independent. And Israel was the first Middle Eastern country to open a mission in Tokyo.
Excellent. How about that?
And Japan had been doing the same in Israel. It was the first Asian country with whom we had a full diplomatic relation.
Why is that? What's that foundation? Because I know that the Jews and the Japanese, it's a weird kind of relationship that go way back in history.
I don't like the word weird. I do like the word interesting.
Ah, okay.
I think we have fascinating similarities and differences.
Mm-hmm.
And the collaboration or the combination of the two is something that is enriching the future.
Right.
But maybe we'll talk about it later. But we can say, identifying the past, we had past relationship between Jewish people and Japan.
Before the state was even established,
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Right.
One should say, even in a political manner, that back in San Remo, when the British mandate was established, it was also thanks to the Japanese foreign minister at the time who supported that mandate, allowing the Jewish people to return to their homeland, establishing a Jewish state.
Right, because there was an experiment, wasn't there? They were shipping them to Hong Kong, to Shanghai, to parts of Japan as well.
That came much later. As a matter of fact, we will not get into the whole history of the Jewish state or the rebirth of the Jewish state, because you do know that the Jews were dispersed all over the world for 2,000 years. I think it's the only case in history where a same nation is coming back home after such a long period. And I think the determination and the strong will of a nation is something that is similar between Jews and Japanese. Mm-hmm. So maybe the Japanese people can identify with our strong will and hope for national determination, to have our own state. But at the same time of that support, much later on, 20 years later on, we have the Second World War, where Japan joined Nazi Germany. But yet, in spite of that, allowing Jewish people, thanks to Sugihara, who enabled thousands of Jews to escape from Nazi Germany, from Kovna, Lithuania, and finding a haven in Japan. Mm-hmm. So thousands of Jews at the time of the Second World War, at the time of the Holocaust, were saved, their lives were saved, and they found their haven in Kobe. Later on, being also moving from Kobe to Shanghai under the Japanese occupation, still their life was saved. So yes, we do have a history with some positive even feeling between the two nations.
Mm-hmm. Even between the Japanese-Russian War of 1902 or so, there was a banker, an American banker, who gave just a tremendous amount of money. He believed in what Japan was attempting to do. And because of him, not solely because of him, but because of his largesse, Japan was able to do the unthinkable.
True. The assistance from East Bank in the United States was very helpful to Japan to win the war against Russia at the time. But of course, also we had the problem of the persecution that Jewish people suffered in Russia. Mm-hmm. Hence, it was a meeting point of the interests. But definitely that was a very appreciated assistance at the time.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure psychologists have looked into that. What is this glue? I mean, it's a very special relationship. It kind of cooled during the oil embargo because the Japanese were so thirsty for oil, and they kind of made a choice, and it cooled the relationship. But even in spite of that, there's an affinity that just it really escapes my ability to describe it.
Well, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not attempting to make any analysis of the relationship from that point of view. But I would like to say, as a diplomat, and previously I was the head of the economic division in the foreign ministry, taking care of promoting Israel's foreign economic relations, that today diplomacy is basically openly relying on many sectors of getting close to one another. It's not only empathy. It's not only military or defense issues, as in the past glorious time of 200 years ago. It was made on agreement to fight together similar wars, etc. Today, it's much more cultural, maybe psychological, as you suggest, but also a lot of economic interests. Mm-hmm. And you have to combine the whole basket. It's a basket full of goodies. And definitely interest-wise, there are many interests involved. And you can see, if you are looking on the 66 years of relation between Japan and Israel, you will see the ups and downs of the relationship as a kind of a regression line of decision-making process out of the economic interest sector. Right. And definitely the first 20 years were good. They developed slowly, but according to times at the time. But the two economies did marvels. Maybe the Japanese economy did much better than Israel at the time in the 50s and 60s. But also for us, it was a U-turn development that made Israel suddenly from getting assistance for all the problem of absorption of new immigrants and all the the other security challenges that we had to face with the different attacks by the Arab world at the time. So definitely we had very many challenges. But yet we developed our economy to a level of an export, from an import-oriented to an export-oriented economy, and also from a socialist kind of economic philosophy into capitalism and into privatization. And our industry started to flourish, but yet it's a small country with no natural resources. Until recently, we are facing with the new development. But our main resource are the human beings, right. The human power. And definitely there's another thing that we are partnering with Japan, because Japan, as big as it is, even though it's smaller in light of the neighborhood, but it's a big country that has main resources, the human being, is the people, right. The people power. And basically, we are sharing similar values of investing in education, in engineering, knowledge, in technology, in science. And not for nothing, you can see that, for Japan, it's the number one in Asia for its Nobel Prize laureates, 25 of them. Israel is only 12. But if you compare it to the number of population, the ratio is much higher in Israel. But the idea is that we have similar, values of developing our knowledge, our technology, our science. And so we are very fitting. Right. We're not competing. We are complementing each other, especially in our economy, because Japan, soon after the war, within 20 years or so, be turned into the number 2 economy of the world. Israel took it about 40 years to develop the miracle of its position now as a very strong economy. Of course, very far from Japan, very far behind of Japan, but
also somewhat restricted because of being surrounded by enemies and the need to develop armaments and to hoist an army in while you're trying to create an economy as well.
Yes, but I think despite all that, the emphasis that brought us, as I was starting to show the graph of the relationship of the up and down. So the first 10 years were climbing up normally. Then the mission became an embassy in both countries. There were exchange of visits, etc., but there were no agreement. And then after 67 and especially 73 with the Arab boycott, or actually the oil crisis, that caused Japan still to keep the relation, not to sever them as some other countries did, but yet in that sense, in the next 20 years, from 73, I would say, until 91, 92, the relations were kept, but much empty in the sense of real trade or real investment or real any economic development. I must admit that in the 80s, I had a Japanese car, Subaru, but that was the only car sold in Israel. I think it was Fuji company that was still doing, the only one that did business in Israel. In the 90s, I think in 93 or 92, 93, there was a totally different picture. Toyota came in, and then today we have I would say that the majority of the cars in Israel are Japanese. So it's again another change. So if I'm coming to calculate, the first 20 years were a development, kind of a normal development. The 20 years after were really crushing down because of economic reason. And exactly after the Gulf War, the whole idea of the Arab boycott, was suddenly empty because both Egypt had already a peace relation with Israel from 79, 40 years ago, but yet after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and suddenly after many countries like China have created relation with Israel, and the pace in which China developed its relation with Israel was much faster, I think Japan at that time realized that they have something to lose. And the development of the relation from the economic point of view started. Agreement started. In the 90s, there was just beginning of the positive development, and from a trade of about 100 or few hundreds of dollars, of millions of dollars of relationship, when the 70% of Israeli export to Japan was diamond, and the import from Israel of diamond was about 29% of Japan import at that time. Soon, in 93, it went up to 2 billion total volume of trade. That shows you the exact jump. Today, you can see 20 years later, a different shift, but it's even a more positive shift. And on that, maybe we can specifically
Well, I know that it's just prelude, because what's going on in Israel right now, and the age of it's not the intelligentsia, it's just basically the population, the high level of education. Israel they're people of the book, so they've been learning, their culture is learning, and this explosion that we can expect because of so many startups that are there, the ideas that are coming out in cryptology, and all of these just wonderful things that, gosh, only the Israelis can do. There are so many little pockets of technology that they really dominate in.
Basically, Israel today it's in a very leadership position, especially on innovation. And I would like to say, with modesty, there is not a sector, a field of an issue that Israel doesn't have expertise in innovation. And it's actually from the land to the space. It's from agriculture, that we conceive it as a very developed science in Israel. And it's not just happening recently. Innovating in agriculture started in the 50s. Energy issues, actually solar energy was developed in the 50s. Water management was developed in the 60s. Israel innovative process has started from long time, even before the state was born, but actually was regenerated immediately after the statehood because the challenges were calling for more attention to it. The mind of the people. But in the 90s, government stepped in even more deeper in encouraging the ecosystem of innovation, creating incubators, 24 incubators around the country. So we have developed a very interesting ecosystem that many likes to understand and to copy. But through the process of privatizations, through the process of, economic growth that occurred in the 90s in Israel, we came to a point where today we have we have become a center of interest of very many issues of innovation, especially in cybersecurity. Internet of Things now is the main issue. So everything is connected and everything can be terrorized. So cybersecurity is a very important issue for infrastructure or for the autonomous cars or what have you not. And also, of course, the issue of the medical care, life sciences,
Yes.
collaborating between the academic levels and finding the right development. Israel, being a strong economy, has also been being very attractive to investment, to foreign investment. Today we have 350 global companies, Google, Facebook, you name
Dentsu,
it, Intel.
everybody's there.
Out of 350 such R&D centers of global corporate, there are 220 Americans, very many European, and now growing numbers Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. Okay, a growing number of investment to the point that in 2013, the Japanese investment in Israel at the time was about $20 million. Today, 4 years later, 5 years later, we are calculating over $6 billion. This is more than 120 times fold. So definitely it's a growing interest. And about 70 Japanese companies are already opening office or making some investment of sort. Almost all the trading companies, Japanese major trading companies, have opened an office and some kind of investment in Israel. 11 of Japanese companies have already established R&D centers. So we are looking at a growing, a very intensively growing Japanese involvement in the Israeli economy. The basic notion of it is that the collaboration between great minds together can create a much bigger impact, not only on the two economies, something that both countries will enjoy, but also on third countries.
Right. You have a particularly good friend in Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan. What's the foundation of that? He will soon be the longest-serving Prime Minister in Japanese history. So this is really important that you have such a tight relationship with him. What's the underpinning of that? Do you know?
I think that it has a lot to do with the way Prime Minister Abe is looking at the economy and the fact that he identified the values of doing a stronger relation, having a stronger relation with Israel for the Japanese economy. The Abenomics is something that you're familiar with. I think the fact that both prime ministers visited each other, and there is kind of a chemistry of relationship between them.
Just in the spring, right?
Yeah. Basically, it was his second visit. The first time he visited Israel was in May 2015. In January 2015. Prior to that, Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Japan in May 2014. But I must admit that even before that, an interesting fact is that the KDRN sent in February 2014. February 2014, there was an initial big delegation that came to Israel to, scouting and seeing what we can do together. So the matchmaking process...
And Jetro is there as well.
Exactly.
Right.
From 1997, but... in the sense. So, to conclude, I would say that the government to government, the G2G relation became a catalyst, a catalyst. There's something that really boosted the economic interest and the already starting to grow interest in the economic field with the business community. So they got a jump start to the process through the visits. Now, in this May, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited again in May 2018, and again to promote. It's another push to promote. There was the GIN was established, which is the Japan-Israel Innovation Network, which is a collaboration of both government and non-government economic organization to boost the matching of the two economies on the issue of innovation. And I think it's an exciting collaboration.
Tell me about, if we can go back a little bit more to the embassy and the presence of Israel in Japan, the Chamber of Commerce, how vibrant is that? You know, it strikes me that there are so few Israelis who live in Tokyo or live in Japan.
I think it's an interesting question, but I would like to say that the proximity is the problem.
Yes, far away.
We are far away from each other. We have many similarities, but geographically we are far apart.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in spite of the agreement that we have on transportation, of mutual lending rights in both countries, it was never materialized. So when El Al wanted to lend, they were not permitted. When they were permitted, you know, it didn't come into fruition. And now I've been knocking on doors among Japanese airlines. And finally, I hope it's not a question of when, if, it's a question of when a direct line will be established.
So a direct flight, you think, would really change that?
Absolutely. It's a game changer.
Okay.
Because business people, actually, they want to save time. And it takes too long through a transit, flight to go from one location to another. You come to do business in 2 days. You're wasting 4 days on the road. That's too much of investment. So basically, it will be a direct line whenever. It will be really a boost to the relations and to the economic relation between the two countries.
A lot of people have that same complaint, don't they? A lot of other countries.
True, because it becomes an issue of an egg and a chicken. What comes first? And the airlines say, well, there is not a demand. We already last year surpassed 50,000 in volume of Japanese and Israelis going into each other's country. Definitely Israel is coming to visit Japan much more than Japanese come to Israel. But we do expect that this year, 2018, will show much higher numbers, so we will surpass the 60,000.
Okay, so the numbers on tourism, there are more Israelis that visit Japan than Japanese that visit
25
Israel.
times bigger if in relations to the population, because after 126 million Japanese, only 18,000 visited Israel in 2017, where Israel has less than 9 million people.
Right.
And we've been visiting Japan, 33,000 people in 2017.
That's amazing.
So the numbers, and now it's a buzz. Very many Israelis are being fascinated by Japan for years. Even in schools, in academia, many people, even learn Japanese from the anime on TV. We've been exposed, a generation of our children were exposed to Japanese language through the anime, through the Pokemon, and even through the martial arts. In Israel, in Tel Aviv, I think it's the biggest number of sushi restaurants outside of Tokyo. So the Japan culture and the Japan beauty is something which has been really attractive for Israelis, but it was too expensive. Nowadays, it became more feasible. So many more Israelis are coming from whatever, left and right. We hope that coming season next year, it will have we will have at least some charter flights with El Al, and hopefully we will see much bigger numbers.
Well, hopefully this video will help us. The Israeli mission in Japan, it's been here since 1952. The prospects for it flourishing in the future is really apparent. Please stay tuned. Thank you very much for joining us.